thinking about our animal shelter that has been in need of replacement since 12 years ago, since I became a county commissioner. And so I know we've gone ahead and made other purchases and of properties, but I am very concerned about things kind of jumping ahead and starting to invest in things when we have other things that have been waiting. So I don't know when it's appropriate to talk about the CIP, but I do feel like I personally cannot vote on several of the items on the consent agenda until I really have an idea about some of these other issues. So I just wanted to put that out there to begin with, but I'll turn it back over to you, Mary.
And I will say we are preparing to have a larger discussion about the CIP, the projects in the CIP.
So good morning, commissioners. I'll certainly take the first part of the question, which was the process for the 826 East Pettigrew property. So as you may recall, we purchased that property last year with the intent of repurposing the facility for the Bull City United program. At that time, we basically took the BCU group through the facility to had a round of programming just to confirm that the site was suitable for their intended purpose. Since then, we've had a new CISS director who's came on board, who sort of helped us sort of update some of that program to the best of her ability. And she was also a part of the selection process. That's the RFQ selection process by which we selected the design team to perform the project. And so the next phase and what this contract is for what we want to call preliminary activities. We want to go in and do a program verification to determine the space needs requirements for BCU as we know it to date. There's also going to be extensive community engagement around sort of rebranding, remarketing that program. And that's really going to be the first phase of this. And then subsequent to really nailing down what the project needs to be, we would have to come back for a future, more robust design contract. And so that's been the process to date. And, you know, outside of that, this is really just sort of us sort of ramping up in preparation for the project. So.
Yeah, I guess I think what concerns me is that, I know that the intent was that there needed to be really some office space or space for BCU, but I guess, has there been a conversation about just broader uses, not just for BCU, but, you know, because this is a lot of money that we've already spent buying the property, but it's going to be a huge investment renovating it. And I just, while of course we want a home for BCU, there are just a lot of, you know, we always, I think as a best practice, what are other possible uses of that space, or co-location, or just other needs in the community that could be addressed. And so I think also the community input is, I think, really important, and it is. I'm not sure that we are we? How is that going to happen from what you just described?
So can I interject here too? Yeah. Because we are also, and you'll hear this a little later, we've also engaged another, an economic development consultant to help us shape the scope of those conversations and the community engagement. And so that is something that we're preparing to do, because we did hear you earlier when you shared a concern that this would be used solely for BCU. And so we are preparing to have those conversations, the community engagement conversations, as well as internally, what other uses can this building accommodate?
Thank you.
Commissioner Howerton, get your hand raised as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think you pretty much hit on the same concerns that I had around how is this laid out? And in reading through the information, there's a lot of preliminary process that's going to happen before we even get to community engagement, the community engagement piece. And I guess there's so many different projects on this consent agenda. It kind of gets confusing as to which one we're talking about. As you read through it, it's like 4 different projects here that we're working on. Is it 4? At least 4 different projects that we're working on. Yeah. And none of them are going into the CIP. Is that correct?
Well, and again, we'll have a larger discussion about the CIP, but this certainly is something that is in our CIP that we are preparing, that we have allocated funding for, but we don't have the full scope of what we're going to do with the project. So these are the preliminary costs to do the feasibility studies, the assessment, but we do plan to actually have those community conversations to help inform how we'll use that building. And we will bring it back to this board before final decisions are made.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Carter?
Yes, I am glad that the larger sort of concern about the CIP was raised. It does feel a little bit like we're making one-off decisions outside of the context of the CIP. I mean, I know that the CIP is, a living document. It's a blueprint. It's not set in stone. We approve it every couple of years. I can't remember the last time we actually approved it, but I am glad that's coming, and it's coming soon. And I will just say, as far as the animal shelter is concerned, I'm the one who has been appointed to sit on that board, and every single meeting they ask about it. Someone from the community, usually it's a different person, will join the meeting just to ask about it. And I give the same answer every single time. It's in our CIP. Yes. We've got $30-some million set aside for it. It's still a priority of this board. Yes. But I guess when people see large dollar amounts directed towards other projects first that might not even actually have a prominent place in the CIP yet, they become concerned. So I just want to reassure those around us that it is still in the CIP, the animal shelter.
It is.
And we're going to be discussing it officially soon, and we'll have more information to come.
Yes.
Manager, could you, for the public that may be listening in, would you clarify what CIP means? Because everybody may not know what we're talking about when we're using acronyms like that.
Great question. Yes. It stands for our Capital Improvement Plan, and so that is where we identify the larger projects that cost. I'm not sure of the dollar threshold if it's north of $1 million, but those larger projects that we will have to plan for the investment for. And so the staff actually does a great job of estimating what the cost of those projects could be. And so we put a placeholder in our capital improvement plan to help us plan out and strategically identify how we will accomplish those projects and how much funding it would take. It actually goes into, whether or not there should be a proposed property tax rate increase to fund that. And so we bring all of that information to the board so that you all can make decisions on if this project is something that meets the priorities that the board has, and you look at how much it costs and then how we would fund that. But yes, we are planning to have those discussions. And you all see that there have been a lot of projects that have popped up. We've made some purchases, and so we want to kind of bring everything back before the board to take a very comprehensive look at how all of these purchases and how we incorporate them and how they impact what we had planned before we made some of these other purchases. And you all may shift some of the projects that are in the CIP. And so we're certainly aware of that and appreciate the questions. This is what we need to help provide guidance as to how we move forward. And if this item is something that you all would prefer that we hold off on until, we have this larger CIP discussion, we can certainly accommodate that. But it is something that the staff knows. What we don't want is to have a lot of vacant sites. sitting and us not making movement and progress on preparing them for our community use. And so that is what staff is doing, is trying to make sure we're keeping progress going with some of these.
Makes good sense.
So one other question, just quickly. So what you just said, if we don't move forward, the property just sits there without any action at all.
And the danger in that is that it can become a blighted property. Those who are unsheltered could take up residence in those properties, and the longer that it sits without any type of attention, it deteriorates, and it costs us more money to try to upfit and bring the building back to an appropriate use.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to add, like, my, not question, but I guess request for the future conversation. So I think when we have these type of ad hoc projects and construction initiatives, is it possible that, like, when we're talking about it, to have, if it's specifically planned for, like this one is specifically planned for housing, Bull City United, when we're having those conversations, like, have a presentation from Bull City United or whatever the project is to come in and give us a status update about what is the programming going to be like, so that we can even visualize it before the construction and everything starts to move forward. That'll give us a better understanding of how the space will be used, because as the rest of my colleagues have mentioned, like, there are several projects that have kind of been waiting for space. I mean, I know we've mentioned the animal shelter and other things, but also, like, conversations around, and I know this is newer than Bull City United, but just the immigrant and refugee services, the city and county wanting to have a space for that, but just so having a conversation of how it's actually going to be housed to visualize it.
Okay, we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Is that it?
I think that's, any more questions or comments? Okay, well,
I just think, in general, I'm wondering when, because even before next Monday, I really would like to see just a copy of our CIP, what it is right now. So if David, if we could get that shared with us, thank you.
Yeah, we will do that. Great. Okay, thanks so much for that. Item 240113, authorization of an amendment to design contract with R&D Architects, PA, for design development and construction administration services related to the Stanford L. Warren Interior Upgrades Project in the amount of $58,640, plus approval of a 7% design contingency in the amount of $14,929 for a total revised contract amount of $228,199. Okay. 240126, Budget Ordinance Amendment Number 24BCC 00091, Public Health, to recognize $15,000 from the NCDHHS Division of Public Health, Epidemiology, Communicable Disease, Section Branch for increased refugee screening.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Thank you. Well, this item is of particular interest to me now because I spent last week at the border between Mexico and the United States and had the opportunity to see the process that migrants are going through when they come into our country. And I think one of the most powerful results of that experience is now having a better insight into what people have gone through. And so this question about screening, I would like to hear from our public health director just a little bit more about what that screening is like and how people are then connected to both mental health and physical health resources. And also, if we can get any disaggregated data on, do we keep data on country of origin, age, and also gender, things like that. One of the things that I learned in a meeting in the Ciudad Juarez with representatives from Save the Children, UNICEF, UNHCR, United Nations High Commission on Refugees, and other organizations, is that 90% of the women and children who have come through the border have been either directly experienced or been exposed to gender violence. These are some of the issues I'm really concerned about, and wondering how our screening process, what does that really look like? If you could tell us a little more about that.
I will do my absolute best. Good morning, Rod Jenkins, Public Health Director. Thank you for that question, Commissioner Jacobs. I'm proud of the work that we've done, primarily because Durham is a sanctuary city and we are most welcoming to this population. We admittedly don't have all the resources needed. We would need like a whole team or a whole department to take on the refugees, but we do the very best that we can in the Durham County Department of Public Health. Upon entry, the first thing we try to do is leverage the language barrier because oftentimes they're coming from different parts of the world, and our language line can do but so much. But we ensure that from a health screening that we're able to really take care of them from the top to the bottom. That includes primarily the health screen. That also includes a lot of work with pediatrics, and it also involves lots of partnering. So I know one thing that you're very interested in is how do we leverage the services that we have here. We work closely with Lincoln Community Health Center, who's been our value partner for many, many years, and the providers are housed in the Durham County Department of Public Health. We also work closely with World Relief to ensure that the services that they need, be it mental health, behavioral health, or just access to resources are needed. The main thing that, believe it or not, that they need is like just really prenatal care, diapers, all of those things that babies need. So Welcome Baby with the Cooperative Extension is a valuable asset, and I'm pretty sure Donna Rewald can attest that they have been busting at the seams as far as the number of services that are needed and the number of refugees that come. And then, of course, settling them in has been a little tricky when it comes to housing, stabilization with housing. That continues to be a little bit more needed as far as work. But as far as Durham Public Health, we ensure that the funds that we receive, which will allow us to service about approximately 150 more, which will put us close to 925, 930. We ensure that they are healthy. They ensure that they have TB screens. We ensure that their physical health is such to become thriving members of our community. That's just a little sliver. I know you don't have all day, but just wanted you to know that we take pride in the work that we do.
Thank you. And I will share that I saw something remarkable, which was in a migrant center in El Paso, people being offered a COVID vaccine for the first time. Most people who come through have never had the opportunity, and 90% of the people are really grateful and just take the vaccine right then and there, which is, of course, a much higher rate than we have in our country.
Indeed.
So I got to watch that. So
that has been the experience from my understanding at the center in Virginia as well. And we do offer them a battery of immunizations when it comes to the Durham County Department of Public Health. Yeah. But we will endeavor to get you that disaggregate data that you requested as far as like the number of refugees and where they're coming from, the different countries.
Yeah, and going back to that data point that I shared, I am particularly interested. I know we have, thank goodness, we have El Futuro in our community, but of course they cater to, Spanish-speaking people from Spanish-speaking countries. But I think that understanding the trauma that people have been through and how we're really addressing that is something I'd like to learn more about. Thank you.
Indeed. And before I go, I just want to commend this Board of County Commissioners for the investment that you all have made in the specialized positions that we have, to include ACEs and our own refugee officer, so to speak, that is housed in the cooperative extension. It's forward thinking. We are appreciative of those advancements. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Jenkins and Commissioner Jacobs, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about your trip to the border later as well, and just recognizing also a fact that people don't realize. Like, I think it's very important that we have individuals visiting the southern border, but the reason programs like this are so important is also that most undocumented individuals who enter the United States aren't actually coming through the southern border. So having these other opportunities for screenings and resources and services provided to our refugees here locally is absolutely vital.
All right, thank you. We'll move now to item 240134, approval of capital project amendment number 24CPA00020 to reduce the county courthouse elevator repair capital project 4190DC085 to $0 through a $91,495.36 reduction in PAYGO funding and appropriate $91,495.36 in PAYGO funding to the new Facilities Systems Capital Project 4190DC087 to begin the upgrade and replacement of the Durham County Detention Center fire alarm system devices. 240136, approval request to relocation of all graves within the abandoned cemetery identified as the Emory Cemetery.
Commissioner Carter?
I just wanted to comment on what an interesting fact it is that this is a requirement of county governments. You know, the wide array of services that we are by general statute required to provide, and this is one of them. Relocating graves in abandoned cemeteries. Pretty interesting.
We actually, myself, Ellen, and Deputy Manager Maurice actually had a very interesting, and Brent was there with the NCDOT Transit Equity Director, where so much of her work is focused on when they're doing transit plans, of when they're digging and doing like preparations of how many graves they find while building the infrastructure for transit projects. Something that I never thought about.
Yep. And the importance of us knowing where kind of unmarked cemeteries are so that we don't disrupt, you know, the humanity and the families experience when their loved ones' graves are dug up and they didn't know it. So it is a very sensitive topic, and so that's one of the reasons that we need to be aware of it, especially for planning purposes and things. Yeah. 240146, approval of purchase of goods, contracts with store office environments and interior elements for library, administrative office, and miscellaneous furnishings from the NC State Contract Buying Program 420A-Furniture for S.L. Warren Library in a total amount not to exceed $359,467.29. 240159, approval of capital project amendment number 24CPA00021 and budget amendment number 24BCC00087, appropriating $200,000 of sewer utility fund balance and transferring those funds to the collection system rehabilitation capital project SE051 to cover contract amendments. 240167, approval of Carolina Management Team LLC contract amendment for painting and coating services for Utilities Division in the amount of $25,000, increasing the contract amount from $190,000 to $215,000. 240173, Budget Ordinance Amendment Number 24BCC 00088, approval of amending the Lebanon Fire District Fund budget to decrease the transfer to the county's general fund for personnel expenses and increase the distribution directly to Lebanon Volunteer Fire Department in the amount of $37,086.51.
Just a quick question on that. So does that mean that Lebanon Fire Department will be paying for their own staff?
Yes.
That's the way I read it.
That's what that means. Yes, ma'am.
So will that, the majority of their funds will come from where? Is this going to be enough, or are they going to have to do a tax?
Mm-hmm. So I'll ask David. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. And I saw David preparing to come up as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. The majority of Lebanon's funds come from their tax district, collected by Durham County, and then is distributed to them monthly based off of their budget that they propose to the county.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right. 240178, approve NC Division of Water Infrastructure State Revolving Fund application for Utilities Division Triangle WWTP Rehabilitation and Upgrade Project, and authorize Chair and County Manager to execute certain documents related to the application. 240179, another long one. Approval of Capital Project Amendment Number 24 CPA 00023 and Budget Ordinance Amendment Number 24 BCC 00093, appropriating $350,000 of debt service fund balance, transferring $350,000 of debt service fund balance to the PAYGO fund, and appropriating $350,000 from the PAYGO fund to the Durham County Sheriff's Training Facility Capital Project 4310 DC 091 for pre-construction activities, as well as execution of a contract for pre-construction services in the amount of $202,003 with C.T. Wilson Construction Company / Rankin 3 Grading for the Durham County Sheriff's Training Facility Project.
Commissioner Jacobs?
Yes, just to reiterate, this is something that, again, I would want to see where we are at with our other CIP projects. Also, to your point, Madam Manager, this is different than a property like the Pettigrew Street property where we already have a building that we don't want to deteriorate. This is related to new construction. I would actually ask that this specifically, that we do not take action on this until our board has more information as part of the budget process. That's without, at this point, is what I would, my feeling is about this, so.
When we have the capital improvement documents shared with us, does it include how many years this project has been sitting on the CIP plan and how many years remaining till we execute the plan? If not, can we add that?
We can add that. I know we have years identified as to when we think the project would commence, but we can certainly.
I think it would be helpful to see when was the initial conversation about how long. Commissioner Carter?
Okay. Well, that's sort of my question. I do not remember where this sits in the CIP, right? But it is currently in the CIP, to your point. And there are these like eye-crossing charts where, by year you see how much money and what the source of the revenue is and where is this. So it may very, very well be that this is in the CIP for right now, right this red hot second that we have already approved it, and this is just where the source of funding is coming, but I'm not sure. And that was my question. Is that indeed the case, or?
These are all great questions. Thank you, Commissioners. To start with, the CIP does include definitely the out years, like how long we're projected to take to complete a project. Often we wrap up the prior years into one magical column called prior years. We can work to kind of illustrate or put in a text field somewhere how long the project has been on the books. But sometimes how long a project has been on the books is not necessarily the full story, because a lot of times projects exist over kind of a continuum and they kind of evolve. I know the sheriff training facility has kind of evolved for the last, I dare say, 3 years or so into just kind of becoming a little more of a training facility than what the original intention. I'll reiterate that the CIP is the plan. That is what it is. It's the plan you all approve. No dollars are actually allocated in the CIP, period. Once you have reviewed the CIP and approved the latest version of it, there's still no dollars approved. You don't actually approve a dollar to be spent until a project itself is taken. So, for example, the first item today was for the Pettigrew Street. What you're approving there is the investigation of what you may spend money on. Sometimes you have to spend money to understand the scope of what the project may end up being. If we didn't spend some of the advanced money on community engagement or architectural study or assessment of the building, we may put a $10 million figure, I'm making up a number, on a Pettigrew Street project. The community feedback and the architectural studies may say $30 million. So we don't want to tie ourselves into a figure without that knowledge in advance of kind of, you have to do some prep work, and sometimes that prep work costs money. I can't speak for that one in particular, but I think Perry's bringing forward, or the engineering office is bringing forward some of those to do that prep work. So we put a more informed project and amount in the CIP, if that helps kind of the overall conversation here. The sheriff's training facility has been in the CIP for at least 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure exactly how long, but it has been in there for a while.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Doesn't look like it.
Okay. All righty. Item 240183. Approval of capital project amendment number 24 CPA 00022 and budget ordinance amendment number 24 BCC 00092, appropriating $200,000 of debt service fund balance to the PAYGO fund for a new capital project. Project build renovations at Shops of Hope Valley, 4730-2635, DC 161, as well as authorize the county manager to execute a contract for architectural design services with R&D Architects for the project build renovation at Shops of Hope Valley capital projects.
Commissioner Jacob?
Yeah, and I also want to understand this. Is this something also that is time sensitive? I think we need
I don't think this is time sensitive, but again, it was just trying to make progress toward.
Okay. I just didn't know, again, I'm thinking about the different buckets of, because these are 3 different things.
Yep.
But whether this one was similar to Pettigrew Street, or kind of how urgent is moving forward with this in the scheme of things.
So I will say, feel free to come on up, Harry, but this is not urgent. No, ma'am, this is not urgent. This is the staff making progress on preparing spaces to locate some of our departmental staff.
Yeah.
But we can certainly take a pause and bring something back to you all, similar to what Madam Chair asked about a presentation, if we are preparing a space for a department, for them to come back and bring to you all what the proposed programming looked like and how we would use that space. That's a very fair ask.
Okay. I don't know, Perry, I didn't know if you wanted, if you had any. Okay, you're okay. Okay.
Perry's kind of like back and forth in the podium.
Yeah.
I know what Perry's like. Look, y'all tell me what you want me to do, and that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say I feel like a little bit like I'm speaking out of both sides of my mouth, because we have said, we own this shopping center.
Yes.
What the heck are we going to do with it? What are we putting in there? You know, and so I really do appreciate staff trying to advance this and make the progress that you're describing. Is Project Build currently located at Cooperative Extension, or they've floated around?
In the Justice Services Center, if I'm not mistaken. Someone correct me if I'm wrong.
Right, so they're supposed to move into this space. So, yeah, I think that's why we really need like a more broad discussion. And I know we just now bought a farm campus, but you know we've got 5 women here who really like to buy things. we need to put
yes, ma'am. But that's what we're here for, to help you all make the decision. So I am certainly fine with us taking a pause and coming back for a more broader discussion.
Maybe not too much of a pause. I live over that way, and you know, that shopping center is being used for parking, for all kinds of things, and we really don't want that sitting there vacant and idle for so long, because you know you've got a lot of residents that live around that shopping center, so you don't want to create a hazard by just allowing it to just keep sitting there. So I'm not for just sitting on the property and not making progress there. We own it. Now we need to make some plans about what it is that's going to happen there, so that it's not sitting there idle for people to cause problems.
So to Commissioner Howard's point, could we have a discussion at our May work session?
We can do that. We'll be prepared to have some discussions there.
Can we have, like, this may already exist, but like a list of, these are all the Durham County program and services, this is where they're currently housed? Like with Project Build, like that's at Justice Services Department. This is currently at this facility, just so we can see.
We can.
Yeah.
We can certainly do that. All righty. Any other questions or comments on that one? Okay. And in 240186, approval of a contract amendment with Hayti Reborn Justice Movement in the amount of $70,000 for a total contract amount of $770,000. ACM Pierce, can you just come up and provide a brief summary of how this is not a new contract, but it's an amendment because we are adding funds to the funding that we got from our community projects through former Congressman Price's office.
Good afternoon to the board, County Manager Sowell, County Attorney Joanne Pierce, Assistant County Manager, also here with Crystal Harris, the Director of Community Intervention and Support Services Department. So, Hayti Reborn Justice Movement already received a $700,000 grant through the federal government, through the Congressman Price's grant opportunity, and the $70,000 is funds from the city. It's just the city, solely the city. I have to take a look at the Deputy County Manager, and we're just transferring that. It was to support Hayti Reborn Justice Movement, so we're asking that these funds be received into our budget so that it can go where it was designated to go, which is Hayti Reborn Justice Movement.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
I think the ILA specified 50,000 versus 70.
Correct.
So within the ILA, there was an amendment to also allocate an additional $50,000 for community programming. And so there was a commitment to add $20,000 to the effort.
Okay.
And the remaining amount was for us to determine later how to use.
Okay.
That's it. Okay, Madam Chair, that concludes the consent agenda items.
Thank you so much. And for folks joining, because there's so many new faces, these are items that we discussed today, and then they come back to us at our regular meetings for actual votes, either for approval or pushing for more discussion. Now that brings us to our discussion items, starting with the Bulls Academy update presentation from Made in Durham. I believe we have Andy Miracle, our Economic Development Director, Casey Steinbaker, ED of the Bulls program. And we have allocated for this item 30 minutes. Do you think about 20-minute presentation, 10 minutes for questions? Perfect.
All right. Yeah, hit the button there, and I can kick us off real quick.
You'll see a red light come on, and that means it's on.
Perfect. Good morning, Chair, and to the dais. Today we're going to hear an update on the Bulls Academies from Made in Durham. Durham County has supported the program since 2021-2022 with stipend support through Durham Tech Community College. Most recently, commissioners have approved $3 million in ARPA funding to help grow and grow and scale the Bulls program through 2025. Today's presentation is designed not only to address program updates, but also framing the long-term viability and sustainability of the program through outside funding once the county's ARPA funding ends in 2025. And with that, I'll hand it over to Casey.
Thank you, Andy. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, thank you very much for having us here today. I want to reiterate one point that Andy made, and that is today we normally come into you with all kinds of data and numbers and charts. We're not going to do a lot of that today. What we really want you to understand is how we have taken this time and this opportunity that you've provided to us and really taken a step back to look at how we are going to continue to do this work in the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years moving forward. And a really big piece of that, as you well know, is we were originally created as a systems organization to look at the ecosystem of education to career inside Durham, not just programs. And sometimes when we get into great programs like we're incubating with Bulls right now, we have a tendency to focus in on that as that pathway as what it is that Made in Durham does. But Made in Durham is much bigger than that. And so what we wanted to do, just take a few minutes today and kind of walk you through some of that. And I promise, Andy, that we will indeed be quick today so that we don't hold everything up like we usually do when we get into this. But we always start with, thank you from our team. Several members of our team are here with us directly behind me. The rest of them are off doing God's work that we're about to tell you about. So thank you again for all that you do for us. So I do want to get into this as part of this process of really looking at our sustainability. We did take a step back and look at our mission, vision, and purpose. And so it's on the screen here. You can read it, but it's important for people to understand that this is the framework by which we look at everything. We do what? So that what? Because we believe what? And I think that's really important for everybody here to understand that we are built around the concept of ensuring that all Durham residents have the opportunity to participate have access and opportunity to participate in the economic prosperity of Durham. So we always begin with that. But let me really just give a little bit of organizational updates. This I think is really important for everyone to understand as we talk about this. Again, Made in Durham is a systems organization. You can see on the screen here, we've really spent some time honing in on what does that mean and how do we execute along that line. It's much easier said than done in an ecosystem that is very large and very disparate, pieces of it all over the place. So what we try and do is the easiest way to explain it to people is when we get involved, we are actually looking at identifying all the gaps, barriers, and misalignment misalignment that currently exist in the system. And the system that we use is through models of collaboration. And those collaborations are who are our existing partners, who are our existing youth, community organizations, employers, all those pieces of the system. So how do we identify gaps, barriers, misalignment, engage the community, the larger community, in finding solutions to them? Our goal is not to forever run the solution. Our goal is to incubate that solution, figure out whether or not it works, iterate it. If it doesn't, if it does work, how do we train the community? How do we engage the community to work with us on keeping that system in that pathway moving forward? As part of that pathway work, and that's what we call it, the initiative pathway work, we try and get away from the program concept and say this is a pathway initiative that we're exploring and quite frankly doing extremely well on right now. But we've had lots of instances of that since our beginning, which was actually 10 years ago. Hard to believe, right? 10 years ago, some of you sat and engaged in this that long. But as essential parts of the work, we do that incubation of pathways. We do that metrics and evaluation. What works? What doesn't work? Why does it work? What do the outcomes look like? And constantly evaluate that in real time and document that. And then obviously at the scalability. It's how do we continue to fund this, scale this, if it's succeeding, and move it forward. So that's, if you think about our work, it's a systems approach to looking at incubating pathways, looking at the metrics, outcomes, and determining the scalability and fundability. We'll always play in that space in different ways, in different issues, but always in that way. So I want to take a little bit real quick to look at the system. So what do we mean by the system? When we first got started, we did a landscape analysis. In other words, we looked at what was going on in that education and career system and looked at where people got off the pathways, from education to a career. We looked at where the barriers were, and we started playing in that space. One of the things, we continually do that, but we've just started a renewed interest in doing that work again. We're starting a process of doing that updated landscape analysis. It'll take us a couple of months because, as you well know, in Durham, we have many, many, many organizations that play in that space. So till we get out there and be able to have the opportunity to talk to them and engage with them. But that landscape analysis gives us a sense of, at this moment in time, what does it look like? And what does the system-based work need to be to address the things that landscape analysis allowed us to do? So we're actually in the process of doing an updated one 10 years later of what that landscape analysis looks like today. Pathways work, a good example of the pathways work. What we really get involved in pathways, we talk a lot about the programs, right? But what we want you to understand is that the initiative that we do in these pathways, we take a really deep look at what we're learning in this process. In order to be able to do that, we have created, as you well know, 3 pieces to this system. And I will tell you that the community engagement, we call the education piece youth engagement, because Made in Durham's piece of the education is the youth engagement portion of it. Our partners do the education piece, obviously, and it's integrated and seamless as how we do it, but our piece is the actual youth engagement. And then obviously the corporate engagement in terms of getting the youth jobs as well. I will tell you that one of the things that we've come to believe is that this community, youth engagement, education piece, and corporate piece will probably be the recipe that we use for every initiative that we get involved in. It really works incredibly well. And quite frankly, it's a pretty true reflection of how Durham works. We just don't always connect it and align it appropriately, but this is the way that we do that. So we've aligned ourselves internally around this system so that when we're looking at it, we don't just go do work, guys. We set very specific objectives and actions that we're looking to with metrics. We have who's in charge of it, who responds to it, what is the goal we're trying to achieve, what are the objectives around this, just giving you a sense of, we have spreadsheets galore, which people other than myself, as you well know, are really in charge of those things because that's not my forte. It is, however, Rashid's. Excuse me, I didn't introduce Rashid. Rashid Bellamy is our Chief Operating Officer. Rashid runs all of the internal operations of Made in Durham. People that call me the Executive Director, I tell everybody I'm the person that's in charge of strategy and finding the money. Rashid's really the person inside the organization that makes it all work together with our team and collaborates with all of our partners. And so he runs all of this work that you're here to see about today in terms of the internal operations. But he has set this this up so that every piece of our work, every area in community and in education, in youth engagement, and in corporate has very specific objectives and actionable items and outcomes that we track on a regular basis. And what are we doing with those metrics? Well, one of the things that Rashid is in the process of doing is helping us figure out how to take all of that data and use it to create really real in-time dashboard data analysis, right? So we can see at any point in time how we're doing this minute with this cohort and how we are doing overall. And so I'm giving you an example of these dashboards. What they allow us to do is they're going to eventually, we haven't built them all out yet, we're in the process of doing that, but they're fed by a database that is, am I correct, Rashid, is actually generated through Salesforce?
It will be at this point. At this point, we're actually doing it manually, but the intent is for us to actually bring on a CRM, which is going to be Salesforce, to do that for us automatically.
So what that allows us to do is keep that, though that CRM will populate these dashboards in real time.
Yeah, it's a customer relation management tool. Yeah.
I'm with you. I feel your pain, Heidi. Feel your pain. But we want to give you an example of what these looks like, and that we will have them for each of these three component areas. We're building them out right now, but I want to share with you one example of what it was we're talking about. So this is the youth engagement one. Look at this one. What you see on the top half is the current cohort. Cohort 6 is the current completed cohort. Cohort 6 finished in December. Okay, they graduated in December. And I'll do you a real quick update. Cohort 7 started in January. Cohort 8 started in February, and cohort 9 is we're recruiting for right now. Okay, so in addition to what you see here right now, we have another 58 students that are already in the system and another 30 being recruited. But what you see up here is cohort 6, and these dashboards that we're looking at. These are data points that are important to us. Number one up top is performance. How are we doing? So we had 20 students enrolled in this cohort, which is our last completed cohort. 20 of those passed the GMP, which General Manufacturing Practices, Standard Operating Procedures, which is course 1. 18 passed biowork. 18 passed biowork and actually graduated from the program. That's a 90% graduation rate, which is, you all know, you were here with us when we were back in the 40s, right? Trying to work our way into this. 9 of those actually passed the national exam to be a biowork certification. Again, I would reiterate to you, the 18 that passed are now considered quality talent for the biotechnology industry. The 9 that passed the exam go to the front of the line and make a little more money because they're considered the highest level of experience. And so you can see we track that now. We can see at a moment's time what that looks like. Underneath there is the support. We track every bit of support, the tutoring, the child care, the food pantry, the attendance at study sessions, career events, cohort meetings. We track all of these, and I'll show you in a minute why we track that. That allows us to create these journey maps that we can watch a student's journey in this and know when the interventions are important, right? And when they are, what level of importance they have. The bottom part where you see is our aggregate impact. So at any point when you're looking at this dashboard, you also get to see where we are at this moment in time in totality. So C1 through C6, right? We enrolled, then you see all of these numbers here, the number enrolled, the number that have passed, the number of the biowork. The other thing the CRM allows us to do, and if you have any questions, that's why Rashid's here to answer all these, it allows us to actually take all this data, create, in real time, create datas and charts seamlessly. So we could go and chart for you the progress in graduation. We can separate that out. And for instance, an interesting statistic is to look at cohort 1, 2, and 3, where graduation rate averaged about 45%. And then you go 4, 5, and 6, and it's averaging 75%. So you can see and look at in real time where these activities are and what's going on. So this is the kind of information that we will have available to us in real time all the time as we make these decisions. And as well as eventually, I believe we've talked about how this becomes public as well, so anyone can look at this information.
This is really great and really informative, right? I thank you for walking us through this dashboard chart here. like, for example, Casey and Mr. Bellamy, Rashid, might you look at this and think, well, maybe we don't need the food pantry? Or you might say, well, actually, in 6 cohorts, 6C1 through 6, we use the food pantry a lot. Correct. Or, so is that
Yes, exactly.
Might you do that?
So this data right here is also very specific to the audience that we're briefing. So there's a lot of metrics behind this, so we can actually pull out to tell us exactly what iterations we use and what made a change in the metrics. And so, for example, like this is something that we use to show across the board of the support services that we provide and kind of the impact that it might have. But you're absolutely correct. It allows us to be able to make decisions, and this is primarily one of our reasons for actually doing this, to make data-informed decisions around if an iteration we made, did it work or did it not work? And if it didn't work, then how can we go ahead and make it either more efficient or replace it with something else? And this is kind of what drives those conversations.
Gotcha. Thanks.
I see more hands raised, but I believe you have 10 more slides. I want to give them time to get through the slides, and then we'll have questions at the end. That's okay. Yeah.
While they're on this page, I just have one question. Okay. This one. When you say 18 past the cohort, past the exam.
Your mic, Brenda.
I've got it on, but there's something wrong with my light. The light don't want to work. I can talk loud. My question is, how many of those 18 are employed?
Will be the third slide. You don't see that right now.
Okay.
Because we're just giving you this as an example, but we'll get into that later, a little bit later.
Okay, great.
All right, we're going to keep going through. This is probably the best example of the journey maps. I want you to see that we map every part of the student's journey. This is from community engagement through youth engagement. We are just beginning the build out of the corporate, as you all know from the last time that we were here, working on our corporate. I should also introduce, by the way, Joseph Featherstone, a new hire as well for us. Many of you know Joseph from Durham, his experiences in Durham, but he is now our corporate engagement director. He's the person that runs will be building out all of our engagement with employers here. It gives you an example of what that is. We also want you to know that in addition to our metrics, we're also calculating all your metrics as well. As Rashid said, there are dozens and dozens of data points. We just picked up a few to put on the dashboard for your example here. And obviously the last part is scalability. A big part of scalability and funding for us, and we're going to talk a little bit about that and answer a lot of your questions on that. A big part of that for us is getting the word out, right? Being able to scale this and create partnerships. We're speaking all over the place and doing a lot of things, but it's really about getting the word out that this is working, it's here, and people are getting jobs as a result of it, and things are going really well. So we partnered with Durham County to do a four series with the Durham Magazine. This will be a full-blown Durham Magazine initiative that will go on for all 4 of their issues in 2024. This one is just a general overlay of the Bulls Life Science. From there, we'll go into actually student experiences. You'll hear about our graduates working. You'll get to see them in real life. Why this is important is we're finding a significant amount of our referrals coming through community-based organizations by design, but also through parents. A lot of moms out there making sure that their kids are aware of this initiative. And so we want to make sure we get it out in the community as well. And this is an example of the kind of things that we'll be doing. We've also done a documentary where we followed cohort 6. We're using feedback from or video pieces for that, for a lot of behind the scenes and a little information for other people to be able to see. So we've been working on that, but that'll all come out this year. And that's really important, quite frankly, for the work that we're already doing. I'm going to end on these slides, and this is what we're working on. This is what we would normally come and lay out all kinds of statistics to you on, but we really wanted to just take a step back and look internally. Systems work. We're going to do the landscape analysis. We've done hired a consultant to do the additional pathway development. Some really interesting stuff going on there. A Durham Economic Mobility Project report, which I'm going to come back to in a minute, and a public policy analysis. When you talk about how many are hired, one of our issues with hiring is that this is on the non-credited side of the house of Durham Tech, on a community college system in the state of North Carolina. There is no requirement. If you get a degree, a certified degree, an AS or a BS degree with a college or university, there is a system in place in which the university can follow that particular graduate and their job and their income. There is no such system on the non-accredited side. We are reliant on the student telling us at this point who got a job. And so one of the things that that's just one example. One of the things that we're looking at are what are all those gaps and barriers that might be policy issues that there could be something done about. We have a local regional resident who is a graduate of Yale. I believe it was Yale. Was it Yale? Yeah. No, she's in Harvard now. And she went phenomenally smart individual and is now doing a public policy master's program at the Kennedy Center at Harvard University. And she's agreed to do this Made in Durham as her project, the thesis project. So hopefully soon here we'll get some really good policy recommendations on these kind of things as well. So that's the big systems work we look at. The Durham Economic Mobility Report is one of the things that we're finding in our sustainability, I'm finding in the sustainability as I go out and talk to larger organizations that could potentially fund us, right? Bigger nonprofits, corporate, et cetera, is, we talk a lot about in our beginning statement that we believe that there have been large gaps in the connection and opportunity for Durham youth to participate in our economy. Well, there's been recent work by a company by the name of Economic Leadership. Many of you know Ted Abernathy, been around a long time. He's been doing some work for other communities around economic mobility and actually taking a look at their citizens and seeing that level of economic mobility that has been taking place as a result of the economic development activities. And so we're talking to them right now about a scope of work for us to do a Durham Economic Mobility Report. Where were we 10 years ago? Where are we right now? And what is our goal 10 years from now? So when we go after this funding, we can actually be able to show that while our assumptions are indeed true. Pathway development, I told you 7 and 8 are underway. I will tell you that those classes still have 28 in both of them, which is a really good number for us at this point in that process. The recruitment is underway for an additional 30 for cohort 9. These are all 30 now cohorts as a result of, number one, your funding through ARPA, but also as a result of Durham Tech as they do their upgrades that we've done through some public funding on their lab space. We have limited lab capacity, so we have to get as many students in as we can in limited amounts of time. So we're making the cohorts larger in order to be able to do that and less of them. So from now on, we'll be doing 2 in the spring, 2 in the fall, 2 in the spring, 2 in the fall for the next 2 years, and that'll accommodate their construction, but still allow us to do this. We're getting ready to do our second round of RFPs with our Build Back Better money from EDA, which is where we put money into the community-based organizations to help us identify, recruit, and support students into the program. We're going to do a round 2 of that because we have additional funding. The round 1 will actually finish up this spring. Yes, this spring. Went extremely well. We did a community of practice as well. So all of those nonprofits, all community-based organizations also gather once a month with our staff and work on what is the kind of support we need to be giving to students moving in this program. And we've just started the corporate the placement and alumni work that we've been doing. As I introduced a minute ago, Joseph, he is running that. You saw the dashboard alignment, playbooks, documentation and evaluation. You saw the marketing and telling the story. You can see here the list of places that we are speaking and being asked to speak at right now. We are in D.C. in March. RTI will be doing a national webinar that they're doing on communities of practice and equity. We are the first example of that. That'll run, I put April 5th, but I believe it's this week, the 2nd or 3rd. We will be in Boston as well at a conference to speak on workforce partnerships that they've asked us to come speak on equity and Made in Durham. And I don't know if you all know, but there is a summit coming on, the City-State Summit coming to Durham. That is a national effort to do inclusive economic development by economic development practitioners across the United States. They will be in Durham in May, and we've been asked to do a session for that as well. All of that builds up to our partnership building, what we're trying to do. We're really trying to develop partnerships on a much larger scale here, not just us, but larger scale, so that we can actually fund this long term and scale it beyond biowork. Done. Are you proud? Oh, one last thing. Signals to pay attention to. This is important for y'all. These are not trends. These are just a few, but worry us. A couple of our students who have graduated and now have jobs have told us they've had to move out of Durham because they can't afford to live here. They were Durham residents, and they no longer are, even though we've gotten them a good job. Biotech may be a unicorn. As we do this, what I mean by that is our ability to find collaborative partners outside of biotechnology may be difficult. It's been easy with NC Biotech, who's come to the table and made all of this happen for us. And it's easy because we have a state, national accepted certification exam. Not a lot of industries have that. So I'm just saying, we might have some nuances to what we're doing. And again, defining economic mobility, when there is right now kind of a pullback from corporate to talk loud about DEI because of all the pushback everyone is giving them, they are starting to now move toward this concept of economic mobility and feeling better, more comfortable about having that conversation. So we're thinking we need to think about how we rethink that terminology. That's it. Sorry.
Thank you so much. And right on the 20-minute mark, so we have the exact 10 minutes for...
Oh, can I just note that, Andy? Right on the 20-minute mark.
Yes.
Do you know how he goes through my PowerPoint and say, no, Casey, that's too many slides.
And that gives us 10 minutes for questions from the board. I'll start over in this direction with Commissioner Jacobs.
I just want to say, wow. I am so proud of this program, and I see Linda Chappelle here, also so proud of our Durham Pre-K program. I mean, these are really homegrown Durham programs that our board has supported now for many years because we are trying to invest in people in our community. And I really appreciate that every single time you all come to present to us, that it's a totally iterative process. You just keep trying to make things better, and the way that you all are just, it's really a model. It's really a template, for even the work that we do in Durham County government. I love the way that you're using the Salesforce to create this tracking and the objectives, the metrics, as we look at doing our strategic plan for the county. And these outward-facing dashboards, really important that we are sharing this information with the public because we are investing public money in this. But this is really hard work. It's very easy to say things, and this is where we started, right? Mm-hmm. Disconnected youth. Yep. We've got high-paying jobs in Durham, good-paying jobs in Durham. How do we connect our, disconnected youth, marginalized youth to these opportunities so that they can make good wages, support their family? And it's, really hard. I would love for us to get, I would love to see more of the dashboards, especially the corporate engagement. I don't see how we need the serious engagement of our employers. Mm-hmm. Yes. And especially related to making sure, because the outcome is we want our young people to get these jobs. Mm-hmm. Yes. Our Durham, homegrown Durham young people to get these jobs, not people moving in here from other places. Mm-hmm. And we have all these companies who on the other end, Andy and his staff help us do these economic incentive deals. And so we're trying to make sure we have a good pool of these high-paying jobs here. But we've got, so I'm really interested to see how many people do get employed. I know it's hard to track that data, what kind of salaries people are making, things like that. So if we could, I would love to see some of those, those dashboards, but
we actually have some of that information. So as of right now, we have 25 of our students actually employed, and we're beginning to build that out as far as tracking salaries and also tracking their progression within those organizations as they get hired as well too. So we definitely going to be able to create that and be able to show that as well as we build it out.
Okay.
That 25 number is a number that we we can confirm.
Yeah.
We can confirm that. We don't know if there's more, but we know there's at least 25 at this point. And the second thing that he was making is, and we also know that there are several that have already progressed, that have moved up from their original bioland technician position as a result.
Yeah, that's great, because just the way I've seen that you've created the wraparound support, what does it take to help these students succeed? All the barriers in their lives, but also academically. But I would really like to understand more than the step where we are actually preparing them for the job interviews, the resume, the engagement of the employer, getting them the interviews. It seems like that piece, that final piece, is so important. And then once they get employed, I know that you all still provide the ongoing mentoring, but we really need our employers to step up. I mean, they need a talented workforce, and we're sitting here trying to provide that for them. And I am concerned about the long-term sustainability. Because we're not going to be able to keep funding this publicly with public funds. And yeah,
and that's actually one of the things that we learned as we met with NC Biotech a couple of months back, and they had a lot of the life science CEOs and hiring authorities there. One of the things that we try to find out from them is what will really get you invested in this, and the biggest thing was metrics. They want to be able to see the data, to see exactly the results that we're getting, and that's when they'll begin to really want to be invested. Because right now they spend about maybe $20,000 to $30,000 on one-person recruitment, and we're looking for them to try to be able to put that inside of the program and then homegrown their actual talent, as opposed to right now where they're just benefiting from this amazing talent that they're getting, but they're not necessarily putting skin in the game. So metrics is that biggest thing, and that's why the CRM is definitely going to help us tell that story.
Thank you.
I'll just add real quickly, too, in addition to the accessibility of a public dashboard that we can just regularly have out there, we are working on the creation of assets to really start to better tell the story. One of those first steps being the publication in the Durham Magazine, which is actually available today. It is today. So it will be available in paper form this week, but we're really excited about that as a good first step into introducing ourselves to the community.
Thank you so much.
I'll move over here, Commissioner Howerton.
And my mic is on. It's just got a shortage in the light. So thank you for this presentation. And, Casey, I particularly want to say thank you and all your team. This goes back a long ways. When I think about some of the things I'm most proud of, since I've been on this board for 16 years, this is one of the things that I'm proud of that this board supported, and I've been a part of that. And I really appreciate the work that you and your team have done. And given that, a couple of things I want to ask. Can you say a little bit more about the demographics of the young people that are involved in this whole project?
Yes, I'm going to talk at a high level, but we have, just by the way, we have all demographics of every student participating. So I'm just going to give you a generic, but just so you know, 18 to 25 years old. 18 because these are biotech, biopharma positions, which means there's drugs in the building, so they have to be at least 18 years old. So 18 to 25, historically excluded populations. Our total amount of students that have participated today, we're at 96% Black and Brown.
Okay.
They are, I haven't seen the recent statistics, but as of 6, we're roughly close. We were heavily predominantly female over male, but that gap has closed, and we're pretty even female and male in this process now.
Great, because I remember it was long time ago, was the disconnected youth.
Yes, disconnected youth.
Yes.
And the problem with, and this particular, this just as a reminder, disconnected is 16 to 24, neither in school nor working. neither, right? So disconnected from every part of the system. What we find is more the population that is able to do this well is more those that are one or the other. And what I mean by that is, they were in school, they've graduated from high school. You have to have a high school or a GED equivalent, and there's programs to get, as you well know, you've funded over the years with Made in Durham for the GED equivalent program. But the other thing that we're finding is that a lot of these kids that have made it through high school or made it through a GED program, but are working 3 jobs at $12 and $15 an hour to support themselves and their families. Yeah. And so what we're trying to do is give them not a job, but a career. And this is an opportunity for them to walk into a position, they make $22 to $25 an hour right from the very beginning, with lots of benefits. When you talk to our students and you get to hear our students, the idea that they get health care, the idea that they get any kind of health care, that kind of work is a big deal for these students. So we're basically, and so what we do when we do the program is we try and find students that are really struggling to pay the bills, but really, really are interested in finding a way to get a career. Just never been given that connection on how we do that. We work with our community-based organizations to do that. We get large referrals from our community-based organizations that are out there already with trusted relationships with these youth, and help us actually move forward on that. So that's kind of our target population at this point. Is the best description I could give you at this point.
Okay.
When you hear us say, I only say that because you'll hear us say we've gotten really good at fit and match. Fit and match doesn't mean we're running around getting the smartest kids in the community that don't really need we're running around getting the kids that are youth, young adults in our community that really want a career, that are interested, may know nothing about biotech, but are like, hey, this is something I'm willing to put the work in to actually do. And then obviously we surround them with all the supports they need to be able to do that.
Great. Just one more question. You mentioned housing. It's housing and corporate engagement. And you mentioned the data, that corporate would like to see the data. Do you have a strategy other than the data that will have our corporate folks involved?
Oh, yes. Joseph left. Okay, sorry. He had another meeting. Yes, we do. We've already started that. First of all, we created an alumni association. So anyone that goes through the program is a member of our alumni group. Our alumni group meets regularly to have conversations to find out, or did you get a job? How are you doing? Do you need any help? Or what's going on in your life? That kind of thing. Just keep them engaged while we work on the formal corporate. We're working with NC Biotechnology Center and Durham Tech, who have existing relationships with corporate employers right now. NC Biotech is an amazing organization to work with. As Dr. Solno, Doug Edgerton is on our board with Kimberly, and he is so committed to this work. He is putting together a group of corporate HR site leaders in biotech, and we will be making a presentation now that we're far enough along, and showing them our first round of statistics and asking them to be engaged with us both in not just hiring, but sharing information with us as much as they're legally allowed to do, because that's a limited capacity, and then what it is that they need what data that they need from us to be able to start investing in this. Our goal is, we've been very clear about this, our goal is eventually to go to corporate and say, hey, for every student of ours that you hire, pay it forward for the next one. Pay it forward for the next one. Give us that $20,000, $30,000 you were going to spend on recruitment anyway, and put it into this program.
So can I also add to that too as well? Is it's not just necessarily the metrics as well, but it's also the relationship that we have with corporate. And one of the things is we're doing with life science, we're beginning to find ways to plug them into the program, either where they come into the cohort, either in the midway and they have a briefing, they get a chance to actually interact with the students in the cohort. So that's what Joseph is going to be working on, is creating that relationship with some of the hiring facilities that actually come in and be part of the program at some point in that journey that we showed you on that map, to figure out where they can actually go ahead and be part of the program so they can be invested as well.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And Casey, if you have the date for the Cityscape I do. If you'll share that with us, that'd be great.
I will.
Yeah.
I will share that.
All right. Thank you.
We've all been waiting and anticipating your arrival.
I ain't won a game since '83, baby.
Commissioner Carter.
Somebody in the audience has a pen, P-I-N, if you need one.
No, I'm gonna get a BB gun. I'm gonna do this properly. Whoa.
Yes, I had some things more important things to say. I wish that I could do as good a job of complimenting you on this presentation and on your work as you did explaining what you do and how you're measuring your success. I just think this has been an exemplary presentation, and I think your work is also exemplary. It's hard to do systems change and systems analysis and improvement. It's hard to explain what that even means, and you've really, really done a remarkable job of making it very concrete for us. And probably that's going to help you in many ways with corporate engagement and other ways of bringing in funding, I'm imagining. So I just really wanted to compliment you and thank you. Thank the team.
Yeah, team's
you all
amazing.
do amazing work. I just think it's incredible. And it has metamorphosed some over the years. I'm not even sure that's a word. There's been a metamorphosis over the years, you know, from the beginning to now. It's all related to each itself. Maybe what Wendy said, it's been an iterative process, but it's been really exciting to see the development and the improvement over time. So thank you. A couple of questions, maybe I'll just spit them all out there and you can answer the ones you have time to answer now, but I was wondering more about if you have a post-secondary, so to speak, support team, and it sounds like you do. Mm-hmm. You've got this alumni association and mentors and that sort of thing.
We have ambassadors as well. Yeah, we have ambassadors that participated in the program that now are official ambassadors of ours and engage with existing students, engage in our recruitment, engage with cohorts.
Love it. And do you work with DPS? Do you not work with DPS because those kids are connected still to a system?
No, you know, when you remember when we first got started, we were heavy in DPS.
Yes.
This was very opportunistic and timely, and we took it and ran, and it's been great as a result of COVID. We know that we have to get back into DPS. We're doing this landscape analysis. As part of the landscape analysis, we will be sitting down with CTE and going through everything that's going on from their perspective and seeing where we can reconnect. Dr. Pack is on our board, so she stays connected with us and has been a great supporter of all of our initiatives.
Okay, fantastic. Do you happen to have some sort of an estimated per person expenditure kind of thing?
You know, we're playing with that right now. It's really hard to say at this point, but everyone's asking us for that.
Okay.
She will eventually figure it out.
One reason I think it's important is to show, look, it takes resources to have people be successful. That's why what the state is investing in the per pupil expenditure for public schools is inadequate. That's why we contribute another, you know, how much money we contribute to try to make it sufficient or closer to it. So I think it's really interesting when we have, you know, organizations like Made in Durham and other community-based organizations that are having success with young people. It takes an intense amount of resources.
Yeah, I think I will say this, I think it's a really important point to understand that really what helped significantly move us forward in some of our work was the Build Back Better money. That $827,000, $600,000 of that goes into the community. So we go back to those community-based organizations, when I told you that RFP, and we invite organizations that play in this target population in that space who want to get engaged with us in helping their students, their participants engage in this program to help us identify and recruit. We provide them capacity funds to do that. We give a grant, we use that money, and we pass it on to the community-based organizations. But as part of that, they're engaging with us and helping us. And the second part of that is we provide also funding for one of their staff people to be part of this community of practice. That community of practice meets with us, meets with the staff of Made in Durham and our consultants who are brilliant people in this work that talks about success coaching and trauma-informed engagement with students. All of those things to make sure all of them are getting what they need to be successful in this work. So
right.
I think that's been critically important to our success in getting students into these last cohorts.
And then one final question that I know that I think you all are thinking about it, need to think about it. I think we need to think about it more. Is how to use the local investment, the incentive money that we give to corporations that we're recruiting here to provide great jobs, for the workforce that we want to come from Durham. How are we using that to leverage benefits for the work that you're trying to do? Can we do a better job of using that incentive money to say, we're giving you this, part of the reason we're giving you this is we expect some of it to be reinvested back into our community, and here's a great way you could be part of the corporate team that Made in Durham's working with.
And that's a great question, and that continues to be part of the conversation, both with Made in Durham partners and Durham Tech partners, to understand how we can leverage that opportunity the best that we can in terms of, where can we make the biggest bang for the buck in terms of our ask and what they can provide so that we get the best results.
Great. Yeah, I will say this to you: the Chamber and Made in Durham, Durham Chamber and Made in Durham have had several conversations on this topic about how we do that. The Chamber has just reinstituted its foundation. They've asked me to be a board member on that foundation to really help figure out how we bring more workforce money into it. And they have also offered Joseph office time and space in their facility so he can engage with more employers on a regular basis, and they can start to see that relationship, I think, growing as just normal. Like we are for economic development and workforce development through Made in Durham, or when it comes to the industry sectors we're playing in anyway, are very tight at the hip, and we want to make sure that they see that.
Thank you so much for this hopeful work. It really does feel very positive and hopeful.
Thank you. I had one ditto to everything that has been said about the amazing progress y'all have made and the iterative process, as Commissioner Jacobs has mentioned, of constantly working to improve and find the gaps. I just had a follow-up question from the last time y'all presented. I know we had very briefly talked about the Durham County vacancies that we have in our own system and possibly trying to find ways to collaborate with the BOCC Academy of filling these vacancies through programs that are open at Durham Tech. I was wondering if those conversations have occurred, if there's any way that we can support in those conversations.
That's a great question. I think what we did is we needed, since we have a very specific model that we operate on, what we did was we hired a consultant to come in and help us take a look at how would that model operate outside of biotech, right? And so we're still in the process of doing that analysis, and that's what I mean to say biotech might be a bit of a unicorn because it's got all the pieces. It's got all the pieces inside of it in terms of a unified certification that everyone gets to, if you have it, it's nationally recognized, right? It has a NC, we're so lucky to have NC Biotechnology Center, which represents the entire state of North Carolina, right here in Durham, that brings all the employers to the table and brings all those credentials and analysis to the table. So finding so we've set our system up around that, so finding ways to navigate that in other industry sectors is what we're deep in the weeds in right now, and we can certainly do it, but it's difficult, is all I'm saying, for the model. So it takes a little more analysis than I thought we originally anticipated. We thought, oh, here's a model, let's just go do it again over here. Not going to happen. We're going to have to really iterate to everyone's point here.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate you taking that deep dive look into it as well. Commissioner Vice Chair Burns?
I'm not going to belabor the point. Thank you all for, everyone except for Chair Long from being considerate. I had an appointment this morning. If you all want some entertainment later, I'll be busting all these balloons outside. I did want to ask, or kind of throw out, I'm in agreement with Commissioner Carter that in our community benefit statement, I would be interested in seeing how because you've talked about, this is not the first time you brought it up. It's not the second time I second it. Lord have mercy if we could just get a third. I do think it would be important for us to add it to our community benefit statement and let each industry figure out how they want to work with them. Like it doesn't have to be this broad stroke thing. It might be one thing niche for battery systems with the Bulls Initiative, and then the next time it might be something more niche with biopharma. So I don't want to pass up the opportunity when I could harangue somebody with an additional tax incentive so that they could get something because they work with you all. Number two, I do hear you, Casey, and one, I did get to see some of the presentation. Thank you, Monica, for reminding me. I could look online, but I don't want to hold this because we have so many more presentations to go. I get that you're saying BioWorks is one of those. It's universally accepted. I could be wrong, but I would imagine that maybe in battery systems we might be starting to see some of that. Commerce released this week that we have 80,000 electric cars on the road in North Carolina. That is ahead of our 2025, 2050 goal. We're way ahead of it. And so knowing that Chem Power is here, VinFast is here, we will probably see some other smaller companies pop up that might be force multipliers around those. Perhaps, I don't know what industry y'all are going to go into, but much like Commissioner Alam said, if it's not here, maybe we come up with mini ones as opposed to trying to make it a perfect one. So those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, those are good. I would say advanced manufacturing, which is where the batteries would fall into, is one is definitely on our list. We've been talking about it a lot. For us, there's a little bit of an infrastructure issue there in Durham Tech,
just the one garage. And then what does Wake County have? Hendricks built that $100 million garage.
I know. So but again, it's just part of the process of doing the analysis, and nothing's going to be perfect. That's why I say biotech's a unicorn. We're just going to say, which of these do we got the best shot in? And advanced manufacturing is high on our list. If we are done, can I just say one last thing in closing? Because I only get to come here once a year, and you guys have always been amazing. I'm so supportive. I know that I gush about you all the time, but I do. I have been in this role for a while, but I've been in Durham for a while, and I've been in community engagement for a long, long time. To have 5 individuals so supportive before we had a drop of data that was worth talking about to invest in this. I wish you could be in the room with me when I do this presentation and watch the audience's eyes pop out when I say, oh no, our commissioners on a pre-pilot of 5 kids gave us an investment of $250,000 over 2 years, $500,000. What? I mean, that's what it is I get. So I just want to say thank you, and I needed to do that because I know that some of you will not be back the next time I'm sitting at this table. So I just needed to say thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. We really appreciate it.
I'd like to echo that. I haven't been around as long as Casey has. However, I would say that when we have given presentations to other communities, one from California, one in, I believe it's St. Louis, one of the things they always ask about is, how did you get funded? How did you get funded to be able to fund it? And when we tell them exactly how you guys were able to support us, they're always just, number one, amazed, but they also want to be able to recreate that recipe within their community to be able to get support from that. So I just also want to echo Casey to say thank you all very much for the support.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. That brings us to our next item, which is the Safety and Wellness Task Force final report discussion. And we have 45 minutes allocated to this item, where we have Xavier Kaysen, Marcia Owen, Dr. Jennifer Carroll, Mike Sistrom, Muffin Hudson, and Manju Rajendran. And I believe we have 45 minutes assigned to this, so do you think 30 minutes for presentation, 15 minutes for commissioner comments? Or I have a feeling we might have more commissioner questions and comments on this one. So if we can, move it more towards 25-20.
Well, good morning, commissioners, county manager, county staff. I'm Xavier Kaysen, former co-chair of the Durham Community Safety Wellness Task Force. Thank you for this opportunity to share this task force recommendations with you, specific to Durham County. We want to thank Durham County again for always being, for decades, being helpful to our community as an innovator in recent years for community safety and wellness. I'm going to try to cut my comments short here, so I'm doing some editing as I go. But as a community body, the task force was made up of 17 Durham residents appointed by the city, county, and school board. Our mission was set in the bylaws and drafted by the 3 elected bodies, was to identify proactive, community-based approaches to safety and wellness place as alternatives to policing and the criminal legal system. The task force met as a whole from April 2021 to October 2023 and formed 4 smaller roundtables which met more frequently to address areas of the most pressing concern. Those were the Criminal Legal System Roundtable, the Violence Prevention and Intervention Roundtable, the Crisis Care Response Roundtable, and a roundtable on youth and schools. Each roundtable conducted listening sessions with our neighbors. We listened in small groups, town halls, surveys, one-on-one conversations. We sought the voices of our neighbors that were most impacted by violence, trauma, and marginalization. I do want to say at the hub of that activity, we had our facilitators and lead researchers, Dwayne Campbell and Rose Worth, and we owe a great debt of gratitude to them for keeping all this together. Rose is here with us this morning. We issued a total of 17 recommendations. In December, we presented both to the City Council and DPS Board of Education about the recommendations that were specific to those bodies. One of our proposals focuses on reducing and reforming bail in Durham. We will share those proposals with the relevant county and state entities. We offered this board 7 requests rooted in the expressed needs of Durham County residents and guided by research. Many of them build on a solid foundation of already existing county programs. Our first request is to expand harm reduction services in the county to address the opioid crisis in Durham by directing opioid settlement funds to key street-level services. Our second request is to expand HARD countywide and to establish a HARD partnership with Durham Public Schools. This will ensure that all of our Durham neighbors have access to the care they need when they are in a crisis, whether they live in the city or county or are attending a public school. Our third request is to enhance funding and support for Justice Service Department programs for pre- and post-arrest diversion, specialty courts, and reentry. There is so much wonderful work already being done that simply needs to be expanded. Our fourth request is to improve conditions, programs, and policies at the Durham County Detention Center. While we hope that pre- and post-arrest diversion proposals in jail reform will reduce the number of our neighbors who are incarcerated in the jail, the county needs to ensure that those who are incarcerated are treated with dignity. Our fifth request is to reform practices at the Department of Social Services and the Abuse, Neglect, Dependency Court to prioritize giving families the support they need to make their families whole. Our sixth request is to further expand programs to address gun violence and domestic violence in Durham. This would include funds for an ethno-drama that would speak to violence and trauma in Durham's housing authority communities, steps to ensure a greater understanding between Bull City United and the community at large, and improve the community's response to domestic violence and sexual assault. And our seventh and final request is to support the recommendations we made to the Durham Board of Education, which would enhance restorative and wellness practices for youth and adults serving youth, as well as establishing consent workshops for youth in Durham Public Schools. This request fits within the county's ongoing mission to support Durham Public Schools and its employees. So now I'll pass it over to Dr. Jennifer Carroll to talk about harm reduction recommendations.
Awesome, thank you. Is it possible to distribute the handout that I handed out earlier, Ms. Wallace? Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll be referring to this as I speak. I'm coming to you today not just as a task force member and a concerned community member, but also as a subject matter expert on the topics that I'll be speaking about. Before I moved to North Carolina, I was an employee of the Atlantic Carolinas high-intensity drug trafficking area. I was proud to serve in the CDC as the first scientific lead of their nationwide overdose response strategy. I'm the first author of the CDC's primary guidelines on community overdose prevention, and since I've been here, I have been actively researching and working on the implementation of the specific projects that I'm going to be talking about. So overdose deaths are continuing to climb in the United States, and North Carolina has a rate of overdose death 15% higher than the national average. Fortunately, many North Carolina counties, including our neighbors Wake, Granville, and Chatham, are beginning to see the tides turn. I'm not from North Carolina, thank you very much. Are beginning to see the tides turn with the number of lives lost declining for the first time in years and sometimes decades. But unfortunately, Durham is not one of those counties. Our fatal overdose rate here is still climbing, and in 2022, we exceeded the statewide average for the first time in 20 years. That is a number of deaths that exceeds homicide deaths in this county several times over. So we are asking the county to purchase 2 pieces of equipment that will enable the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition, or NCHRC, to begin meaningfully driving down the overdose rates in our county for years to come. First, a Bruker Alpha 2, a portable Fourier transform infrared spectroscopy device, or FTIR, a device that has become established as in the last decade as the instrumental standard for community-based drug checking programs. And second, a used and refurbished mobile medical unit, nothing fancy, 2 doors, 4 wheels, countertops, electrical outlets, which will allow NCHRC staff to utilize that FTIR to the benefit of our community. I know that there is enthusiasm among members of this board for supporting drug checking services in this county, and rightly so. Drug checking is one of the most exciting and effective overdose prevention strategies developed in the last several decades, and it is a key and necessary service for Durham residents for several reasons. First, cocaine is the drug of choice for many residents of our county, and fentanyl contamination in cocaine, including crack cocaine, poses one of the biggest risks of overdose, especially for those who are opioid naive. Fentanyl test strips are an essential tool, but they give a binary positive-negative result and cannot tell you whether the drugs you are about to consume contain enough fentanyl to potentially be lethal to you. FTIRs, when operated in conjunction with testing strips, often can. This is one way in which these machines can begin saving lives in our county today. Second, a new contaminant, xylazine, is appearing in our drug supply. This sedative drug is changing the presentation of opioid overdose and causing severe soft tissue injuries that are not only painful and slow to heal, but act as severe barriers to other healthcare services, including addiction treatment. It has been identified in nearly 1/3 of the drug samples sent from our county to the drug checking lab at the UNC Chapel Hill Injury Center. That lab takes weeks to return results, but the FTIR will allow community members and service providers to better recognize xylazine contamination at the point of service and offer appropriate safety planning, overdose prevention education, and healthcare services to the individuals who are facing these very real harms at the very moment they are facing them. An FTIR cannot be operated in our county without a mobile medical unit. NCHRC currently serves our county out of a minivan, a very old minivan. I am not confident the passenger door opens, and it is looking longingly at the minivan Rainbow Bridge. FTIRs cannot be propped on the dash of the radio. They cannot be plugged into a cigarette lighter. They need sufficient space to place the device on a flat surface and plug it into a regular outlet. NCHRC also needs human resource supports, including specialized staff and staff time training on the device to operate the FTIR. We have conferred extensively with our community partners. Local NCHRC staff who have faithfully served this county for years are here today to show their support and are fully and enthusiastically behind this proposal. The executive director of NCHRC, Dr. Elise Powell, who is herself a resident of Durham County, is here today to show her support and fully and enthusiastically supports this proposal. Gudrun Parmer, who led the community planning session for opioid mitigation strategies for our county, came before you last May and urged you to take these steps to enable drug checking in our county. And these are not costly needs. If you look at the detailed budget in our proposal, you'll see that all of this can get off the ground for less than $100,000, with a similar ongoing annual cost to keep it operating at full capacity. And second, to direct opioid settlement funds toward the provision of public health materials that NCHRC needs but struggles to obtain. A federal syringe ban is inexplicably still in effect, meaning that the vast majority of support that NCHRC receives through federal grants and contracts cannot be spent on the backbone of their program. NCHRC distributes an average of 350,000 sterile syringes in Durham County each year at an estimated cost of $35,000 to $40,000. That cost must be prioritized by their organization with any discretionary funding before they can consider other things they might need, like an FTIR or a new vehicle. $40,000, that is it. About 1% of the opioid settlement money that this county will receive in the next fiscal year would fully cover all of these material expenses. That is all it takes to keep Durham County, North Carolina from becoming Scott County, Indiana, a place that is known today for one thing: harboring the largest HIV outbreak that this country has seen since the 1990s, solely because they did not sufficiently support syringe access services. And three, to support the expansion of HART beyond Durham city limits and into Durham County, because HART is a key bridge to essential services, and they refer residents to NCHRC for life-saving tools and services every single day. The residents of our county are worthy of this same care. We know that these interventions work. Syringe access, naloxone access, access to opioid agonist treatment with methadone and buprenorphine, and drug checking. There are a lot of new, big, untested ideas floating around out there that are garnering a lot of very unwarranted attention, but these are time-tested, scientifically supported core overdose prevention strategies that work. Yet they are interventions due to stigma or politics or simply lack of awareness, which no community in the United States, including our own, has ever fully funded, fully implemented, fully thrown our weight behind, which is why overdose deaths are still climbing. As an expert, I say confidently that we have the knowledge and the tools to end overdose death in Durham County tomorrow if we want to, and we can change this graph that you have in your hands. This could be your legacy if you want it to be. Thank you. I'd like to pass the mic to Manju, who will talk about heart expansion in the county. Manju.
Thanks so much. That was incredible, Dr. Carroll. It's been such a pleasure to serve with these incredible leaders and the many more folks who engaged in the journey with the Durham Community Safety and Wellness Task Force over 2.5 years. We were so lucky to work with so many community members and organizations and institutions across Durham. And we were very fortunate to be part of a community engagement process that really intentionally centered Black and Brown communities and voices and housed those conversations in familiar spaces that allowed us to have conversations that were rooted in structural solutions to violence and harm. Through that journey of talking with community residents about what crisis looks like and what kinds of solutions they'd like to see, we were able to work with our new community safety department to co-create what HEART would look like. And what that looks like today is a crisis call diversion program where mental health clinicians are embedded in our 911 call center and respond to appropriate calls. Community response teams that dispatch a mental health clinician, a peer support specialist, an emergency medical technician to offer skilled, compassionate, unarmed first response to nonviolent behavioral health and quality of life calls for service. Care navigation, where care navigators follow up with Durham residents after they've had those encounters with first responders to help connect them to community-based care that they want and need. And co-response, where clinicians are paired with law enforcement to respond to certain calls for service that pose a greater potential safety risk. Since June of 2022, when the program began, shaped by Durham residents with a lot of good listening and integrity, HEART has managed to respond to over 13,600 crises. Those are situations that previously would have gone through our 911 center and been directed to law enforcement, and we've taken a really different kind of caring approach where we circle back to Durham residents and ask after a crisis, how can we make sure this kind of crisis never happens again? And as a community organizer with Durham Beyond Policing, I've gotten to be part of the East Durham community design process, where since August we've been in a deep collaborative listening process and design process with community residents in East Durham. And they've shared so many stories of success of how HEART is working in their neighborhoods. I want to note that it has been a challenge to access transparent calls for service data from the Sheriff's Office. But in tracking it in the ways that we've been able, we learned that in 2022, the Sheriff's Office responded to 253 wellness checks, 329 reports of persons with altered mental status, 69 involuntary commitments. And from what we're observing through the city data from the Community Safety Department, there are a multitude of ways that having HEART be able to respond to those sorts of situations could really result in far better outcomes for Durham County residents. I find myself called to lift and honor the name of 28-year-old Black woman Stephanie Wilson, who was killed by a Durham County Sheriff's Office deputy in January of 2022. I watched video footage that she posted herself on Facebook of the entire encounter. She was going through a mental health crisis, and I am just curious what it would look like for us to make sure that every single person who lives in Durham County is able to receive appropriate care in their moment of greatest need. I received a call over the weekend, this weekend, from a Black woman, mother who lives in College Heights, who lives in a Afro-Latina household. She was calling for help because a neighbor was having a mental health crisis, and she asked if there was some way to access heart help. The time at which she was calling was very early in the morning on Sunday, and it was before Heart's office opened. And so I had to explain to her that if she called 911, almost certainly it would mean that she was calling the law enforcement on her neighbor. And that was a decision she needed to make. And she really wrestled with that. She ended up waiting until the Heart office opened at 9:15 and placing the call. We really need to see Heart expand to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We need to see Heart available to all Durham residents within our city system, within our county borders, and inside of Durham Public Schools. That will take work, that will take time, and that will take continued listening to Durham residents in all of those spaces about what we really want it to look like. It doesn't necessarily have to look exactly how it has looked so far, right? There's ways that we can improve this work over time. For example, by introducing an independent number so that, yes, people can continue to access Heart through 911, but could also reach out to a different number to be able to access Heart directly. We need to see more evidence-based structural solutions to violence and harm, and we've heard some of those discussed here earlier today. And we'd like to continue to see more transparency in how we are addressing violence and harm so that we can be really precise in our solutions. Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Manju. And let me just echo the privilege it's been for me to serve on this task force and get to know who I'm sure will be lifelong friends and fellow good troublemakers in the future. My name is Mike Systrom. Let me begin by thanking the County Commission for appointing me as one of the county's at-large task force members. I served on the Criminal Legal System Roundtable along with Marcia Owen, who will speak in a little bit, Muffin Hudson, who you heard from earlier, and Jatoya Potts. I'll first be summarizing two sets of detailed proposals relating to diversion and reentry. You can find the full proposals in the appendix of the final task force report. In general, we urge the county to support the Justice Services Department's requests in these areas when and how they make them through their budgeting process and other discussions with the county manager and county commission on the details of how to implement them. We received invaluable support from the Justice Services Department staff, other local agencies and experts, justice-involved community members, as well as research by Rose Worth throughout our deliberation process. The first set of proposals we present to you is to expand pre- and post-arrest diversion programs and specialty courts. This, along with bail reform that Xavier referenced in his introduction, and a separate set of proposals we'll be pursuing with relevant county and state actors in regard to local bail reform and limiting the use of cash bail, can reduce the number of neighbors who end up in jail in the first place who don't belong there, reduce their time in confinement, and hasten the process of accountability, restoration, and healing for those harmed and those who caused that harm and their families. For pre-arrest diversion, we recommend expanding the current misdemeanor diversion program beyond first offense and to include certain low-level felonies. The county should also urge the sheriff's office to make deputies' referrals to pre-arrest diversion discretionary, as is already Durham Police Department policy. Should note the Justice Services Department staff has been diligently, quietly working on this for the past 2 years. For post-arrest diversion, or PAD, and the two current specialty courts, Adult Drug Treatment and Mental Health Court, we recommend expanding the therapy options available for PAD participants, ensuring more language access for our Latino neighbors in those programs, more long-term community support for program participants and completers, and for all Durham courts to adopt trauma-informed practices. Again, we'd applaud the JSD staff's work over the past 2 years in continuing to innovate with diversion programs, especially through the mental health court expansion, the Stepping Up initiative, and more recently, the Familiar Faces Collaborative. While we didn't have time to develop a full proposal in support of Durham creating a DUI court, we hope the county will explore that option in the future in collaboration with the district attorney, the public defender, the district and superior courts, and the administrative office of the courts. There's certainly support for creating a DUI court in Durham among local criminal legal system agencies, and there are a good many models to study. In addition, while we didn't have time to develop a full proposal for improving Durham's system of care and response to domestic violence and sexual assault, we certainly note that as a priority for future action by the city and the county and the community. Finally, we recommend expanding the Justice Services Department's local reentry councils programs. I'm sure you're all aware of how successful and innovative Durham's LRC has been for years. These expansions could include, among others, allowing JSD staff earlier access to Durham County Jail residents about to be released, comparable to the access they have to state and federal prison inmates about to come home to Durham. Multilingual packets of reentry information for departing jail residents, and for the County Commission to work with the LRC and our state legislative delegation to reform state rules regarding housing restrictions, background checks, and driver's license restoration and fee payments for formerly incarcerated neighbors who've completed their sentence and are coming home to Durham. I want to move on to discussing our conclusions about conditions and policies at the Durham County Jail and proposals for reform. You've already heard some sobering details about the jail from law students and from Muffin. You can also read more of lawyer and current Duke Divinity student Meredith Manchester's observations regarding the use and abuse of solitary confinement at the jail and proposed reforms, as well as a summary of her interviews with our incarcerated neighbors on other jail conditions, programs, and policies, and the written comments she has or will submit. I begin by recognizing that while the sheriff is an independent elected office, the county does authorize the sheriff's office budget, as was referenced in some of the consent agenda items today, including for the jail, which is the largest single department in the sheriff's office. The county commission can and should exercise more oversight over the sheriff's office, including the jail. There is currently limited oversight and accountability for the sheriff's office and the jail. Federal and state laws understandably focus on federal and state prisons. The regular American Accreditation Association's national accreditation process, which the jail passes, isn't adequate. One of the law students will be submitting written comments that detail that further, and we make some note of that in our full proposal. I should note that command staff at the jail, including a new chief of detention services, has taken over in the past several months, so some reforms on some of the problem areas we've noted may have already begun. Our jail recommendations are based on extensive research, conversations with community experts and advocates, what data the sheriff's office would provide, 2 meetings and some back and forth correspondence with Sheriff Burkhead that are included in our full proposal in the appendix, a jail resident questionnaire, regular contact 3 of the 4 crisis response roundtable members have had for years with incarcerated persons and their families. In my case, I've coordinated the Durham County Jail Ministry for 24 years and served on the first iteration of Sheriff Burkhead's Community Advisory Board. And especially, we took great value in the interviews with current jail residents by Meredith and the law students you heard from earlier. Our proposals proceed from the premise that the sheriff and the county's first priority before any new sheriff's office funding requests are considered and approved has to be addressing the extreme staffing shortage at the jail. The jail population, though, also needs to be kept as low as possible. It does no good to expand the jail staff alongside expanding the jail population. Rather, the end goal, according to Sheriff Burkhead, should be to have a resident to staff ratio at its pre-March 2020 level of 3-to-1. Since March 2020, however, first COVID, then staffing shortages have meant no in-person visits, reliance on a video visitation system plagued by technical issues and human error due to overworked and understaffed jail staff, incarcerated neighbors being stuck in single occupancy cells for 20-plus hours a day has been noted, an expensive phone system, a convoluted mail system, and limitations on the ability of substance use disorder, GED programs, and other jail programs to function because of a lack of jail security staff to escort residents to and from those classrooms. We also have recommendations related to jail policies, especially the use of solitary as a disciplinary tool, that are not dependent on staffing issues entirely and shouldn't require substantial additional resources to implement. Again, the full version of our proposals, the rationale and the proposals is in the appendix of the task force report. In summary, they cover four main areas. First, severely limiting the use of restrictive housing as a form of discipline in the jail. Despite jail staff's claims to the contrary, as you heard earlier and can read more in the full report and Meredith's submitted written comments, restrictive housing, otherwise known as solitary, has been employed and abused at the jail. All of this is contrary to well-established correctional best practices, international standards, and even the Sheriff's Office general orders. Instead, if restrictive housing is continued to be used at all, it should only be for violent incidents, only after a hearing to determine the accuracy of the alleged violation, and only for a maximum of 15 days with regular supervision throughout. Second, improving communication and informational access options for incarcerated neighbors and their families. That includes giving residents free access to batteries for transistor radios they have to use to listen to the TV in the pod, returning to residents' mail being able to be sent directly to the jail, making the phone system more affordable, returning to in-person visitation while maintaining an improved video visitation system for out-of-town family members and others, and ensuring that all residents have regular access to tablets upon which vetted therapeutic resources could be loaded. The jail staff is making progress on tablet access most recently. Third, expanding the Justice Services Department's jail mental health staff and substance use disorder staff and programs, as well as reentry support beginning inside the jail for individuals preparing to return home before they leave the jail. This should take the form of a new Justice Services Department reentry case manager position in the jail. Fourth and finally, improving language services for non-English speaking incarcerated individuals. In addition to the four areas we've referenced in our report, you also heard from the law students about other problems at the jail relating to medical care, food, facilities, among others. Muffin, did you want to add anything about the jail? Very good.
I don't think solitary confinement should be used for anything, whether it's violent or not. I just think that folks who are in solitary confinement, it plays on their mental health, and once they get out, if they spend at least 24 hours, it affects them in the long term. It affects them 2 years after they've been in solitary confinement for 24 hours. So just imagine folks being in solitary confinement for weeks, for days, for months, for years. I just don't think it should be used at all. We should look for other practices other than being punitive.
Absolutely. Thank you, Muffin. I want to now introduce Marcia Owen, Task Force Co-Chair, and my friend, to summarize the Criminal Legal System Roundtable sets of proposals relating to the Department of Social Services and Abuse, Neglect, Dependency Court.
Excuse me, but Marcia, before you go, I do apologize.
Absolutely.
Is there another speaking portion that you have, Ms. Hudson, before this is done?
No, I spoke earlier.
No, I mean, I know you spoke, but there's no portion other than this?
That's it, yeah.
Okay, I'll talk about that later. Go ahead, Marcia.
Okay,
I'm going to get y'all for doing this one.
Thank you. If ever there is a place that needs our imagination and kindness, it is our programs for families in crisis. We bring you these proposals regarding reforming DSS and Abuse, Neglect, and Dependency Court, acknowledging that they engage in challenging work. But we also bring urgency because families and children in Durham need our support today. And we have to recognize the immense harm and trauma that occurs when we separate children from their loved ones, even when there is a reason to fear for the safety of those children. A day is like a year in the life of a child. Durham County remains the second slowest county in North Carolina to achieve reunification of separated families with children in care for a median of 677 days, compared to 578 for Wake County, 541 for Mecklenburg, 434 for Wilson, and 259 days for Warren. This system is desperate for reform, and the community is watching, and we care. Durham's A&D courtrooms have been notoriously backlogged and slow, with parents and foster caregivers both complaining about repeated continuances that require them to take off from work and come to court, only to wait all day and have nothing happen. Since Emancipate NC's report in 2022 and the task force report in 2023, we have seen improvements in Durham on court delays. We commend these improvements and look for this trend to continue. We also applaud the new director of DSS for declaring 2024 the year of reunification. We thank you sincerely, Maggie. The county can make investments to further that progress. The heart of these proposals is our knowledge that we can do more as a community to invest in families of origin, to keep them together whenever possible, by investing in housing and food security, by not treating mental health and substance abuse issues as criminal problems, and by streamlining our bureaucracies so that court delays don't keep families apart longer than necessary. We think that while this subject has seemed a contentious issue at times in the County Commission, there are interventions that are non-controversial and have consensus. Our complete, very detailed proposal relating to DSS and A&D Court can be found in the appendix of the task force report. Some of the highlights of our proposal are establishing peer support programs. Evidence shows that parents who are given close peer support move toward reunification on a quicker timeline. People need a lot of help going through the court process, doing their programs, complying with their requirements, and having a close peer support to help them is of great value. Also, increasing access to warm and friendly visitation options for families to maintain ties while proceedings are ongoing. Also, improving DSS's systems for communicating with parents about court dates and requirements, portals for keeping all relevant documents together to catalog important dates, something easy for people to use on their phone, because it is a challenge for people to keep up with all the paperwork and often changing court dates and other important appointments. And lastly, and of course, limiting family separation through all possible means, because removing a child from her family is a trauma in and of itself. And if a child is removed, working toward prompt reunification and deeper support for families' needs are just good for everyone. We encourage you to read the task force report and the appendices for our full recommendation. Thank you. And now I introduce my colleague and former co-chair, Xavier.
Thank you, Marcia. Dr. Wanda Boone, Samuel Scarborough, task force members were not able to come in person, so I would like to present their notes on their behalf. And this is talking about expanding programs to address gun violence and domestic violence in Durham. So violence is a complex, expansive, and it appears in many forms. We approached violence as a task force as a public health crisis and primarily sought to draft recommendations through person-centered models. We studied how adverse childhood, community, and cultural experiences affect residents and form the ways that we heal from trauma. We also concluded listening sessions among survivors of violence and interviewed various community stakeholders, including Bull City United, Duke Hospital's intervention program, Durham County Public Health Department's Firearm Injury Prevention Program, Legal Aid, and Durham's local reentry council. We sought the wisdom of our youth and hosted a youth and community hackathon to address the trauma of gun violence, develop new solutions, and promote healing and intergenerational relationships of support. We concluded that general areas where increased attention and support are critically needed include: 1, engaging children and young people in neighborhoods with the greatest incidences of violence, and provide community building activities that nurture resilient relationships, fostering creativity, physical and emotional health, intellectual curiosity, and also belonging. 2, increase investment in innovative housing and transportation models and coordinate education and job training programs that together expand our residents' ease of participation. 3, to expand age-related and other eligibility requirements for programs already addressing violence prevention, such as Bull City United, Durham Family Connects, Duke's Hospital Violence Intervention Program, and local reentry council. 4, to find alternative means of serving domestic violence protective orders to assure that individuals at risk of violence do not wait weeks or even months for protective or restraining orders to be served by the sheriff's office. And 5, as Mike already referenced in discussing diversion specialty court proposals, to prioritize trauma-informed care training for staff in all appropriate county government and its associate organizations. These general areas of need coalesce in 3 specific violence prevention task force recommendations. The first recommendation is to fund local ethno-dramas that educate and empower Black families in Durham. We also presented this proposal to the City Council. This proposal aims to reduce the risk of violence and victimization by fostering community, solidarity, and resilience through the creation of collective viewing of gun violence-focused ethno-dramas. These films would be developed and shared among residents most impacted by violence. Neighborhood screenings would be held at family reunion-style events that would include resilience education and self-care toolkits. The second recommendation is to continue to invest in hosting youth and community workshops that build relationships of trust and safety, facilitate nuanced conversations about guns and safety, and that develop understanding about mental wellness and provide immediate and ongoing healing from incidences of violence-related trauma. We also presented this to the City Council. And a third recommendation is to promote and fund youth consent workshops to provide Durham Public School high school students with equitable access to sexual consent education. The workshops will be held in a gender-neutral setting, facilitated by professionals from Planned Parenthood, and use various forms of media to keep young people engaged. We also presented this proposal to the DPS School Board. These calls to action reflect an overwhelming and urgent appeal from county residents for government and nonprofit organizations to focus on the safety and well-being of our children and our young people. Almost everywhere and everyone we spoke with urged the task force to recognize that gun violence prevention depends on our ability to respond to the needs of Durham's youth and to build resilient relationships within the Durham community where they reside. We urge you to prioritize this collective wisdom to support the healing and resilience of our children and families living amid unpredictable, perennial, traumatic violence. This concludes our presentation, our recommendations. We took this on with the intent to go deep and wide as far as communication and listening to our neighbors. We also were very intent upon making sure we had reputable researchers to look at the facts, to look at areas that we're also looking into this from around the country. And we appreciate the county's support as being one of the founders of this task force. It was an amazing time. I've been involved in a lot of public-related entities and initiatives, but this one this one hits you at the heart, as it does for all of us who are on the task force and all of us who care about the safety and wellness of this community. That concludes our report.
Thank you all so much, not just for this presentation, but the months, years of work that you've put in volunteer service hours. This is a very, very detailed report. I pulled up the full PDF also. Also just appreciate the fact that you guys made sure to have it in both English and Spanish readily available for all of our community members. And thank you for just the amount of integrity and thoughtfulness that went into each of the community conversations and the different breakout groups, and bringing in the affected community members to those spaces to lead the space, not just be participants. I really appreciate it. I think for me, one thing is, I guess for county staff, I know it's published, all of these reports, on the city's website. Can we get it also on the county's website somewhere?
We can certainly do that. If not, I know that there is a link that we can certainly provide for people to access it. Yes.
That would be great. And I know we're a little bit over, but I want to make sure everyone has time for conversations. We started on this side. We'll start with Commissioner Howerton this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for all of your work, all of the entire team. This has been an incredible work, and it had to be from the heart for the last 2.5 years, almost 3 years, that you've been doing this work, and the time that you've taken out of your life every day to be involved, because you are involved in it every day. If you don't go to a meeting, you're involved. To do this work, and I just first want to preference that I appreciate the work that you've done, and some of it is hits me very hard in my heart about some of the work that you've done. It means a lot. I know the piece that you presented to the city and victims care, that one. I was there to support you in that, and I will support that. My question in reading the report and looking at the budgets, if you had to select 3 of the projects, what would they be? Because we will have a tight budget this year. And, we wouldn't be able to support everything you wanted. So if this board had a conversation and could support something, what would that be?
We will discuss that. You should have been prepared to discuss it today. Oh, they're going to let you talk, Muffin? They're going to let you talk? Okay, I don't like black women talk when they come in here. So I'd love to hear it. I'll come back to that.
I would just observe that when we're having that difficult discussion, that the harm reduction strategies can perhaps be taken out of contention because the county has a special line of funding coming to it that is dedicated to those sorts of expenses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what I hear you saying, that you're going to have that conversation and come back to us. Yeah, because all of the things that you've discussed are important, but it's no way we could be able to do all of the things, and I don't know at what budget we can do any of it. But it would be great to know what would be the most, what would be your, if we could get this done.
And I think to add to Commissioner Howerton's, not just selecting the top 3, but also making it a priority list of the remaining items of, we want to try for 3 this year, but then these in the sense of urgency for the rest of them as well. Yeah. Hey, Commissioner Carter.
Thank you.
No, I'm going to get to her. No, she speaks when she wants to speak. She don't need direction, Mike. Go ahead.
Well, I too want to start just by expressing my appreciation to this group. I have deep respect for all of you and the places that you come from personal experience. You come from having done this work for decades. Some of you, strong research backgrounds. You all bring incredible expertise, and that's why I'm sure that you were selected to serve on this important task force that was established by the 3 locally elected bodies. I very much like to follow our plans, and I consider this a plan that you've brought forward. We created the task force in order for you to help us make good policy decisions, good investment decisions around how to help invest in our people rather than punishments and alternatives to law enforcement and more. And you've really given us so many concrete ways that we can invest our money and change our policies in order to improve outcomes for families in crisis and the urgency around that, and really, really appreciate your process and everything that you have done. I definitely believe that Dr. Carroll's comment about how we have a different source of funding other than taxpayer dollars to enact those recommendations, that is so true. 1% of our opioid funding, I believe you said, would fund all of the recommendations around that machine, the FDIR, the help with sterile syringes, and the other recommendations that came out around that. And we received recommendations around this from our own staff last year during the budget session. So I hope we will move on that. Manju, all your comments about expanding HART countywide really make sense to me, and we've heard that from a lot of people in the community over time. And the HART program has started kind of as a pilot, and they do different pilots, and then they look at and see what works, and then they expand their own programming within HART. And it seems like they have a really strong track record according to their data trackers that are online and the numbers that you presented to us today. I really like the idea of expanding it to DPS. That I haven't heard as much about, but I think that makes great sense. When I was on the school board, the number one request that we received every year, and this goes back 20 years ago, was we need help with children in crisis at the school level, and it doesn't need to be law enforcement. And so I really like that and hope that we'll give that some serious consideration. Mike, all the things that you mentioned and also the speakers today about the jail conditions, and you commented on your presentation today and also in the report that this is tricky for us because the sheriff is his own elected position in the same way that the school board is. And, we can do so much. We do provide local funding for DPS, and we try to exert some level of oversight, but we know they're the ones studying the issues and the needs, and we try to remember that sort of hierarchy. And the same goes with the sheriff too. Yes, we provide local funding, $38+ million, and it sounds like so anyway, all those questions. I'm sorry the sheriff's not here today to respond in person to some of your requests and to some of the things that we've heard, but they're troubling. And I hope that we can work together with the sheriff to make the kinds of improvements that I believe he wants and campaigned on both times. And so I hope that we will really make some progress there that our community can support. And Marcia, I'm really concerned about the A&D court and our families who are in crisis, our children who are in crisis, and how to make improvements within the A&D court system. Everyone complains about it, right? Not just the families who are separated from their children, but also in the certain cases where children may need to be placed in another setting other than the families of origin, those take forever too. I have I have a niece and nephew who are foster parents, and they have a child they've had since she was 8 months old, and she's 6, and still there's been no resolution there, and so that's hard for everyone. So I hope that we will take the recommendations seriously from Emancipate NC and from the task force around the A&D court and keeping families together whenever possible. Establish a peer support program. I like that recommendation very much and think that could be done. And I believe there's a new appointee to the DSS board who has a lot of experience with this, with Wendy Sotolongo, and she could help us, I bet. And then your gun violence recommendations. I don't really understand the ethnodramas, but I'll try to figure out what that means, so I'll have a greater understanding of that. And I think Brenda's right, and also our board chair, about the need to select. I often think to myself, okay, I've got all these things I really believe in, I really want to do, but I have to pick a few, to go with, and so that really would be helpful. And I thank you for your work and this body of work that you've produced. I hope you feel really good about it. I feel good in receiving it, and I want us to follow it, as much of it as we can. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Burns.
How you doing, Mr. Kaysen? How you doing, Marsha? I love and respect y'all. How you, Miss Andrea Hudson? I'm gonna use your government name in here and put a little bit of respect on your name, because it's been real disrespectful today. I'm reminded, because I'm gonna do this, but you have to be policy brave and you have to be color brave. I remember when the community intervention department came in here. They did a presentation about, the heart department came here and did a presentation. They had a sister there the whole time. She didn't get to talk. I remember DAE did a little program the other day. Turquoise sat up there the entire time. She wasn't allowed to talk. I'm going to get to this. I'm asking you, Muffin, don't ever let them do this to you again. I know you spoke on public comment, and to anybody else who thinks that it's appropriate, this is the third time that's done happened in this room, and y'all don't see the staff behind me shaking their head, but it's disgusting. Now I'm going to get to the recommendations. Dr. Kira, I agree with your recommendation, the $25,000 last May when it was presented. I think what makes me happy is I'm happy you gave us some context around it. Like, I didn't know that it needed to, I knew it needed to sit flat, let me say that. I did know that. When Gudrun brought it to us last year, there was a list of recommendations, and I remember that was, to, I think, my colleague's point, I really do wish y'all would have came in here with priorities, wish list, recommendations, because if I'm not mistaken, and somebody correct me because I can't remember all the video, when Gudrun made her request, that one wasn't it wasn't the highest priority, because we actually had other monies, but that was like the next one under that one was the machine. And people think needle exchange is crazy. I don't. It worked in the 90s. If Monica Lewinsky hadn't popped up, we'd have probably had really great policy around needle exchange, but it got washed away, and then we ended up with this crazy AIDS epidemic, right? So the fact that it needs to be plugged up, set on something flat. Thank you for that context. Thank you for letting me know that it doesn't have to be something new, right? Like, I need to be able to plug it up. And then I think in my own ignorance, I was sitting here thinking, we could put it in social services. We could put it in place. But I like the idea of this being mobile, like us working with somebody else during COVID, having mobile units for needles is what was able to get us out into the community. So I just want to say I would support that. I do know how much the machine costs, finding a used vehicle, but also, to your point, I'm happy you brought it up, because many times people come in here with ideas and they don't recognize somebody got to drive the van, somebody has to process the strips, so there are all